I'm Sarah, this is Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here with my week of reading wrap-up, where I talk about the books that I read, what I'm currently reading, and potentially could read next week based on my mood. I wasn't here last week, had a lot of things going on, and hadn't finished anything. I was reading a bunch of books. Actually, I did finish 2, but they're for my In Real Life book club, and I'm so worried that they're going to watch a video and then make our conversation moot. So I'm going to hold off on those. But let me catch you up with what I have been reading, because I've read some amazing ones and then some that I'm going to rant about. So stay tuned. Okay, the first one. This book was exquisite. Absolutely exquisite. This is Isabel Colgate's The Shooting Party. Let me go ahead and say, for those of you in the United States, it's really hard to find this book in the US. So I ordered this from Blackwells. I have the link to Blackwells below. It's an affiliated link, so I get a few pennies for every book that you buy, so just keep that in mind. But Blackwells, their prices are very reasonable. They send things out quickly, and they're independent. So yay to all those things. Back to the book. More importantly, back to Elizabeth Colgate, because I think I may have found a new favorite author. Woo! This book was exquisite, as I said, magnificent. This is set, even though it was written in 1980, it's set in Edwardian period, in 1913, at the cusp of the Great War. And it's set in Oxfordshire at this estate. It's not like a fancy, the optimal estate. It's kind of like a mid-level estate of Sir Randolph. And he has gathered a bunch of luminaries, a bunch of lords and ladies, an count, foreign dignitary, a bunch of people at his estate for a shooting party. And it's very important that it goes off well for him. There's a myriad of different characters, and there's a lot of activity, a frenzied amount of activity that goes on. And what I love about it is that it's not just the upstairs downstairs dynamic between the servant class and the people living in these mansions, the landed gentry, but it's also an outdoor indoor story, which adds an entirely another dimension. Because it's a shooting party, there are a lot of people that are needed to facilitate the act of these very rich men standing there and having the birds beaten out of the bush to fly up, therefore getting killed and shot. Gruesome. Just, so gross. And the people that are there to take their guns and reload them and hand them back to them, and then fetch their and count how many birds they killed. So really, kind of brutal stuff. And so we have the head gameskeeper who is in charge of the activities that need to happen outside. And then we have 2 really interesting characters. We have one poacher, who's known to be a poacher. Everybody knows he is, but he has to get called in as help because someone else got sick. And the second interesting person is an animal rights activist who is on this kind of walking journey trying to proselytize and bring people to the cause of animal rights. 1913 animal rights activists, you can only imagine, right? So interesting. At the very beginning, this is not a spoiler, in the very first page, it says that this shooting party goes wrong and results in a death. So the tension is ratcheted up, and I love a good murder mystery. So the entire time you're wondering which of these people is going to die and how, what's going to put them in the line of the fire. How is this going to happen? And the tension was palpable. It was so good. The other thing that she did amazingly well is she does this thing that Virginia Woolf does incredibly well as well, which is bouncing from character to character's point of view. And she does this as they're standing in the shooting line, and one character thinking about another character, or thinking about themselves, or their romance that they're trying to set up with one of the other people in the shooting party. A lot of affairs. That's done well at dinners. between the people who are listening and wanting to actually have other conversations, wondering about other people in the dining room, just phenomenal stuff. So I'm quite pleased that I actually have some other of her books. I have Winter Journey, which I found. And then I ordered these two from London. This is the Orlando King. This is a trilogy, Orlando King. It's not just Orlando King. Gorgeous cover, right? This is a Bloomsbury Publishing edition. And then this is Statues in a Garden, also Bloomsbury Publishing edition. So I am definitely going to be spending more time with Elizabeth Colgate because I found that to be sublime, a sublime reading experience. So rave, right? The next one, Pan. Oh God. Oh, I was so mad because, fool me once, one thing, fool me twice. Well, you know how the phrase goes. I will not be continuing on with this series. This series is The Miniaturist, number 2. This is from Jessie Burton. This one's called The House of Fortune. I was generously granted this through NetGalley by the publisher. And I wish I could have loved it more. Look, here's what I wanted. I wanted to understand a little bit more about the miniaturist because this is a very shadowy figure that appears in the first book. The first book is called The Miniaturist, and it was published, I think, in 2014. And in that book, we were in Amsterdam in the late 1700s, and we met this young woman, Nella, who was being married to this very wealthy shipping magnate in Amsterdam, into the Brandt family. And the Brandt family, by moving into this very rich, opulent home, she also meets his sister, Maren. And Maren kind of rules the roost and is kind of the pants in the family, so to speak. And we see poor Nella really being kind of bought and leveraged as the wife, but given no wifely duties in any way, shape, or form, and instead given a present of this miniature home, like a dollhouse. And these are very famous. I actually got to see one in the museum in Amsterdam, which was wonderful. And this was something that very rich women played with and had. And what they would do is they would replicate their home down to all of the furniture, all of the interior design, and figures. And the story goes that she starts to receive figurines of characters in her family, and that starts off this kind of spooky trajectory and she doesn't understand who this miniature is and why the miniaturist is doing this. We end the first one not knowing an answer to that. That makes me crazy. Because when I joined the second one, I was like, okay, now let's find out a little bit more about this miniaturist. And it always bothered me in the first book because I felt like it was a very convenient plot device that allowed for this supernatural element to propel the plot forward, whereas I think it could have been done in other ways, because like I said, we don't understand what's the motive for the miniaturist to do any of this. What are they looking for? What do they get out of this? All of that is completely unknown to us. So I wanted to understand that coming into this, and I really hoped that maybe whatever blocks that she had in figuring that out, she'd spent the time since 2014 to come up with a conclusion or a resolution to that. No, there's no resolution to that at all. The miniaturist is still a shadowy character. We've leapt forward in time, and now we have the next generation of Brandts with Thea. And I am loath to talk too much about this because I don't want to provide spoilers for the first one. But Thea is a young woman, but she is a woman of means. She has a lot of wealth, still lives in this amazing home. but has scandal attached to her, which adds to her cachet, but also makes it dangerous for her and hard for her to be marriageable material. So I'm going to leave it there. Here's my frustration with the book, is that it's good. The book in and of itself is good. It has all the elements that I like: historical setting and vibe and feel to it, interesting characters, good plot, except for this introduction of this element that makes no sense to me, and it never has. I don't understand the rules. I don't know why. I don't know how. And it just is allowed to just sit there unanswered. I say no. I reject it. So yeah, I will not be continuing on with this one at all. I don't care. So you'll have to tell me in years ahead, if she ever solves this mystery, then maybe. But until then, absolutely not. But let's talk about another book. This is Annie Ernaux's Getting Lost. This one I was granted by the publisher through Edelweiss. And of course, I'm a big Annie Ernaux fan. I did an entire series on this with Juan. I'll put a link to those videos when we read The Years together. The Years was phenomenal. The reading experience was phenomenal. It is not her easiest work. It's thick, it's dense, it's a little abstracted, but it is the history of this one woman's life told through photographs and French socioeconomic, political history. Deep, amazing, brilliant stuff. I also read a girl story, which I loved, about a girl's coming of age, living a very, very sheltered life, and then going off to be a counselor at this camp and her first sexual experiences. Phenomenal. What Annie Ernaux does is this auto fiction. It's memoir, but she basically acknowledges that she can't always know what happened in the past. It's so interchangeable. It's always shifting. And so she refuses to call it memoir per se. It's kind of like fiction plus, which I think is an interesting way, maybe a realistic way of capturing it. So that was great. This one is a little different. This is Getting Lost, and it was translated by Allison L. Strayer. And in this, we have Annie exposing her journals and reflecting on her journals, the same journals that she leveraged to write Simple Passion. And so we're actually getting two books out of this experience that she went through. In this, she is a 40-something, on the higher end of 40-year-old woman, incredibly accomplished, has already been recognized for her brilliance as a writer. And she starts a very torrid sexual relationship with a younger man who is a Russian diplomat. Now, what's really important to understand about this book is that the affair happened in the late 80s. And in that time, we didn't have the conveniences of cell phones. We were not always available. We were not always able to be in contact. And so the difficulty of this relationship is that she is lying in anticipation of every contact from him. He is in control. He is the one who has to reach out to her. She is unable, because she's the mistress, to reach out to him. She can't call him at the embassy. She can't call him at home. So she has to wait for his approach, for him to reach out to her. And that creates pandemonium in her life. It creates this obsessiveness of counting the days between the contacts and savoring the moments they're together and always assuming that was the last time. It also, what happens is that he's only here for a certain amount of time and can be pulled back to Russia at any given moment. It's fascinating to read that this it's fascinating and very humbling, very human to read that this incredibly accomplished woman, this brilliant older woman with all this wisdom, all this knowledge, can also fall into the trap of obsessive love. and question herself. And I mean, she was meeting Mitterrand. She was meeting with Charles and Diana. She was at the top of her game and still cut off at the knees about this relationship and what it meant, and her importance to him, and emptied out by his absence. So I as much as I enjoyed reading it, and enjoy is the wrong word, I think it was an interesting read. There were aspects of it that just drove me crazy. I'm not a big person for liking dream sequences or dream recollections. I understand the context because she was lacking in the actual experiences. So the dreams were kind of like an amplification of her needs and the amplification of her wants, and her state of mind. But it was more than I wanted to read, quite frankly. And then you just wanted to shake her because she's a feminist. She knows that she's better than this. And you want to say, like, girl, he ain't worth it. This man is not worth it. She knows he's not worth it either. She talks about specific failings of his, that where he doesn't match up. He doesn't meet her. And then she questions, like, well, what is it in her that makes her look for these characters and be attracted to and fall for these men? Absolutely interesting. I gave it a 3.5. 3, I mean, it was, I think the dream sequences and just the intensity of this, which is the point. The point is that she had fallen so deeply into this chasm, but it could be a little tedious. But thankfully, it's a very short novel. You can, knock it out very quickly. But Annie Ernaux just won the Nobel Prize. So, even one of her least effective books for me still was a better read than most books that you read. So I would say I'm interested in reading Simple Passion. I'm going to be reading that with my French tutor in French. So pray for me. So we'll see how that experience goes for me. I'm really looking forward to it. Okay, and then for Victober, I read the next of the Chronicles of Barsetshire. The Chronicles of Barsetshire. That is a really hard word for me to pronounce. Barsetshire. The Chronicles of Barsetshire. But this is number 4. This is Framley Parsonage, and this is my Folio Society edition. It's all wrapped, beautiful little edition here. And I love these Folio Society editions. So I read this one with my dear friend Leo from Leo's Little Book Life. He's primarily on Instagram now, and we loved it. Look, there's so much comfort, there's so much joy, there's so, if you go into a Trollope book, you're going to get interesting characters, you're going to get a sense of place, you're going to get all the emotional depth that you want, you're going to get a little romance, you're going to get a little intrigue, you're going to get some politics, some religious backstory, not the mechanisms of religion and a religious life, but not necessarily proselytizing religion. You're not going to be preached to, but you're going to learn about how religion functions in a town or village. And they're going to get cheeky little non sequiturs where the narrator actually talks to you and peeks out from behind the screen and gives you some insight. One of the things I love most about a Trollope is that you know where you're going. You know where you're going to end up, but it's about the journey. It's about this languid, beautiful, relaxing Sunday stroll through this Victorian milieu. And I just think he's phenomenal. In this one, we have the story of Mark Robert. And Mark Robert has been established as a parson in this parsonage. He's really been placed there by Lady Lufton because he and Lord Lufton, her son, they grew up together and they went to school together, and even though they're not of the same status, they're not of the same social ilk, she believes that she can influence him more than anybody else because of that influence that she had on him growing up. He, though, because he didn't really earn it, maybe, he is somebody who strives for more, and he then uses that position to try to elevate himself further. And as you can imagine, to really bad consequences. I don't want to say too much more, but we've got the folly, we've got the risk of ruin, we have a little romance with some other characters. With Trollope, you're always going to get this very wide range of characters, and it's hard to know who really the story is centering around because it's really about this group. I keep returning to Trollope because he gives me everything that I want except the anti-Semitism. And we get to avoid, it's there in the form of moneylenders. But it doesn't come out in a really horrific way until I would say like the last 10th of the book. All of a sudden it gets really gross. And I'm not going to excuse it. I know it's of the time, it's Victorian age and all of that, but it's the one thing that keeps Trollope from being absolutely perfect in my eyes. But that was Framley. Parsonage, loved it. Then I realized something about victober. I realized that I shouldn't and can't really do more than one Victorian novel per victober, because what ends up happening is that I compare them too much. It's the structure of what a novel meant in those days were very similar, very episodic. You're going to get like a big romance, swooning romance. You're going to get some conflict. Like the formula seems a little more pat, and so it makes it a little difficult for me to differentiate the books. And sometimes I start to confuse them in my head. That happened between the Trollope and another one of my favorites, Elizabeth Gaskell. This is Ruth by Elizabeth Gaskell. And I have to say, not my favorite Gaskell, in that this is the story of a young woman, Ruth, who very innocently, not a willing participant, is basically ruined by a rich older man. She's tricked and kind of at his mercy, and falls under his charms and proceeds to have a sexual relationship with a man and becomes pregnant. And the rest of the story is about the people who shun her and the people who protect her and who see past her ruination and help her and her redemption. And I think ultimately that's what I disliked the most about the story, is the sense that she had anything that she needed to redeem herself for. So she basically spends her entire life redeeming and making herself worthy of the society. And so it feels very, I don't know if this is a Unitarian thing. Elizabeth Gaskell's husband was a famous Unitarian minister, but this feels very moralistic. And she has very little joy in her life. She's paying penance. It feels like her entire life is a penance for something that she was tricked into and kind of led astray. Beautiful writing, touching moments, like lovely characters, but the overall morality's tale, I didn't really enjoy very much. So yeah, this is not my most favorite Gaskell for sure. So that's what I read. Let's talk about what I'm currently reading. So I'm doing the Balkan trilogy as a group read, and this is an amazing trilogy. We have so much to talk about. It spills over into the next week. Absolutely phenomenal. Am loving the conversation. We're halfway through, 2 more check-ins to go this month, but it reads fast, but it's so rich, so rich. So that, delighted in that. Starting a buddy read of The Rings of Saturn by W.G. Seibold. I'm doing this with Natalie of A Curious Reader and cannot wait to hear her thoughts because I have to admit, I don't know what I'm reading. So our first check-in is today. I will be checking in and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing if she can help me make heads or tails of what I'm reading. Then I'm also reading another NetGalley. I'm on a NetGalley binge right now because I had a space of time where I wasn't doing as much. And so I'm reading The Rabbit Hutch by Tess Gunty. So this is up for, I think, the National Book Award. So we'll see, but just started it and already it is intense. There's a lot going on. It's set in an apartment building and we're kind of moving from one of the apartments to another apartment in this building. The characters seems like there's a lot of chaos, a lot of pathos happening, and so it feels intense to begin with. So curious to see where that goes. Then I would be remiss if I didn't read at least something from a Black British writer. This is British Black History Month, and I really like to pair the Victorian reading with something from British Black history. This is not historical, this is contemporary, but I think it's important for us to recognize that the Victorian era and all of the wealth would not have happened without the colonialism, without all of the exploitation of the sugar plantations in the Caribbean and some of the other exploitation that was done in India, as an example. So always important to keep that reference in mind as you're reading all of these opulent books about these estates and all of the like. So this one I'm doing in audio, and it is exactly what I was looking for. This is Honey and Spice, and it's by one of the best names I've been able to say in so long. Bolu Babalola. Doesn't that just ripple off your tongue? And then the audio, which is phenomenal so far, is by Werush Opia. And it's fantastic. It's set in modern day, and we have a romance. So we have a young feminist woman who is kind of giving the shove off to this guy who thinks he's all that. He's like the player at this university that they go to. And the character seems like a very thoughtful, smart, strong, independent woman. She does a radio show. There's an advice column aspect to it. And she's just seems like she's got her act together. Well, all of a sudden, all of these questions, these advice questions come up about how to trap a man, how to get a man, how to make a man like you. And this is counter to everything that she and her best friend have been promoting on this radio show, and she's irate about it. She's upset about it because she wants women to want better for themselves. And so she thinks and realizes that there's one man at the fulcrum of all of this swirl, and it's a man that she actually ran into in an elevator, and he took her breath away too. So I love the setup, really fun, exciting. I need a palate cleanser. This feels perfect. And so, yeah, looking forward to that. I've spoken way too much. This is much longer than I expected, but thank you so much for watching. I would love to know, have you read any of the books that I've mentioned today? Have you read anything similar that you would recommend to me? And other than that, thank you for watching. I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.